I'm Wesley Morris. I'm a critic at the New York Times, and a few weeks ago, I had a free moment during the NBA playoffs, and I flipped over to C-SPAN, which that's a conversation for another time. But when I did it, there was Pete Buttigieg.
Don't I feel welcome here? Thank you so much.
He was doing a town hall in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and I was watching him hold court, and that got me to thinking that gayness has never been in wilder territory. And by wild, I just mean normal or basic, but also complex in its basicness. Watching him on C-SPAN, though, what I was really thinking about was how many ways there are right now to be a kind of, regular gay. There's, of course, the classic, I'm coming out. There's out and loud, there's out and quiet, there's out-ish, there's, is he out? There are more out gay men in the MAGA movement than there are in men's professional sports.
Trump's agenda is about making America a normal country.
Like I said, wild times. The day after I watched Mayor Pete, though, I read a thoughtful, rangy essay by the critic Mark Harris that ran in the Times T magazine that argues that closet culture was essentially kinda back. And I was like, oh no, it is? His jumping off point is Pee-wee as himself, a new HBO documentary about Paul Reubens, the performance artist best known for being Pee-wee Herman, the very popular avant-garde host of the Saturday morning TV show Pee-wee's Playhouse. If you found him later, you probably remember him more for a couple of career-altering scandals. But no matter how you think about him, this documentary has the potential to redefine and expand your understanding of him. In the documentary, Reubens comes out as publicly gay, but he died in 2023, and until this documentary, had been closeted for most of his life. Mark's essay traces an entire mini history of the closet's tragic function in American culture. He writes, it turns out that Reubens, a figure of irrepressible joy as Pee-wee, felt that he was harboring a dark secret. And decades later, he found himself trying to explain not homosexuality, but a lifetime of concealment, a lifetime in the closet.
I don't want to come off like a victim in some way. I kept who I was a secret for a really long time. I hid behind an alter ego.
Today's secret word is fun.
All these different emotions, all these different influences and factors. I was like a good vessel for it all.
So, I wanted to talk to Mark about the state of being out. And if I can think of scores of very prominent gay people of all genders, is the closet even the right way to think about where we are right now? If who's gay is still information we crave, and I think it is it information we deserve? Mark's been writing about entertainment culture and its legacies for a long time. He's the author of some essential Hollywood histories, 5 Came Back, Pictures of a Revolution, and he's also written what I think is the definitive biography of the director Mike Nichols. He's also working on a history of gay popular culture, and he and I used to write criticism together for Grantland. Well, not together, but we did do it alongside each other. This is the most important part. I love reading his work, and I'm glad he stopped by. Mark, welcome to this show.
Thank you, Wesley. It's great to be here.
What were you, like, in college?
When
Pee-wee's Playhouse was happening?
Yeah, probably in college, yeah.
Did it seem cool? Did it seem lame?
Totally. It was one of those things, no, totally cool, not lame at all. It was one of those things like where you would get high and watch it on Saturday morning.
You were one of those.
A little bit. But you'd watch it with people who got it. Mm-hmm. Like the way you got it. Mm-hmm. And that wasn't everybody. You know, there was a big core of people who would be like, why would you watch a Saturday morning kids show? Well, because this one is special and this guy is special. And he had, like, you know, because it's this weird combination of incredibly innocent humor. I mean, it was never smirky about talking to kids.
No.
You know, and one of the lovely things about the Pee-wee documentary is that, you get how seriously Paul Reubens took that. I mean, he really did feel that he had a responsibility as a children's entertainer.
And he knew he was transmitting something.
Right.
I read this piece that you wrote, and I watched this documentary. And I really came away from it thinking that Paul Reubens was a very particular kind of closet case, where he makes this choice to essentially focus on his work because he assumes that coming out of the closet is going to mean, or like remaining openly gay, is going to inhibit his opportunities to sort of practice his art.
Right. Which is, I think, not something that we can dismiss, because when we're talking about this decision, we're talking about basically the early to mid 1980s, when the landscape was incredibly different than it is now for the very, very small handful of gay people in entertainment who were even considering coming out. And for Reubens, there's this other factor, which is essentially, even though Pee-wee spoke to many different audiences in many different ways.
Simultaneously.
Yes, but I think it's important to note that he wanted to be a children's entertainer, among other things. Pee-wee's Playhouse was a Saturday morning show. As many knowing adults tuned in, so did a lot of kids. And I think his baseline belief that an openly gay star of a live action Saturday morning kids show was not viable at the time that he made his decision was probably correct.
Yeah, I was surprised by how clear he is in his understanding that that was the choice he was making. Like from the vantage of a person who at this point was decades beyond the height of his fame and had presumably time to consider his choices.
Yes, and also had time to consider his own mortality. I mean, when Paul Reubens participated in this documentary, it's pretty clear that he already knew he had cancer. He was living with it for about 6 years before he died. So this is a man who knows that he doesn't have infinite time rolling before him. And he's very, this is one of the things that moved me so much. He's very undefensive. He's very matter of fact. He's like, this is the choice I made. I wasn't a victim. The choice had a cost. I'm aware of what the cost was. I didn't know what the full cost would be when I made the choice. Here I am now, toward the end of my life, looking back at it.
I mean, I think that in a way, you can appreciate Reubens thinking through his life in this particular way as a useful, for example, of the trade-offs, right, that certain people make in order to continue to work. He was in a relationship with a man for a number of years.
Right. I mean, this was probably when Reubens was in his 20s and had gone to Cal Arts and was more of a kind of avant-garde / performance artist. And he was ambitious. He was trying to forge his own identity. It seems that maybe his boyfriend at the time was a little ahead of him in that development. And one thing I think is probably the case, the movie doesn't fully get into this, but I try to talk about it in the piece a little. If you're in the strange place where you say, okay, I'm going to go back in the closet, or, okay, I'm not going to come out, you think of it maybe as a decision with the words "for now" implied in brackets.
Like you're just going to come back. You're going to reverse your decision, or like at some point you'll get stable enough or comfortable enough to be able to then be out.
Like, let's put a pin in this whole gay thing and we'll come back to it later.
Right.
I don't think you think of it as a lifetime decision or a decision that is going to have ramifications that roll down through years and decades. And yet, here is Paul Reubens in this documentary decades later, saying that, yes, this had real long-term consequences.
So wait, can you just walk through what Paul Reubens says about going back in the closet in the documentary?
Sure. In the documentary, we learn from Paul Reubens that when he was a student at CalArts, which was probably early 1970s, he met and fell in love with a slightly older man named Guy, who was also an artist.
I should say in the film, there are a couple photos of Guy from Reubens' personal photos and home movies, and he is a handsome Negro.
Very handsome. And apparently, according to Reubens, the inspiration for a couple of Pee-wee's verbal tics.
Excelity.
But this was at a time when Paul Reubens was not Pee-wee Herman yet and didn't know what he was going to be. So they moved in together. They lived completely openly. This was serious enough so that Reubens introduced Guy to his family. And then it broke up for, I think, very normal reasons back in that era, which is, Guy was a little bit ahead of Paul Reubens. I'm calling him Guy because we don't know his last name. And Reubens was trying to establish his own career and get started and felt that he was living too much in someone else's shadow.
Just regular relationship problems.
Exactly. Sometime around then, Reubens just makes the decision. He's not in a relationship or anything like that. He just makes the decision that he's going to go back in the closet. Those are his words, because he calls it, I think, a decision made out of self-hatred and self-preservation.
Yeah. Very striking.
Yeah, it's a tough and painful thing to hear him say, but that's the decision that he makes.
You're a journalist. You've practiced journalism before. Do you think this film works? There are just so many opportunities or so many moments in this film where I felt like an opportunity was missed to ask another question. Does the movie work for you?
I do think it works because I think I think it's almost in the nature of a really good documentary profile to leave you with a little bit of, but what about this? And I want to know more about that. This tells you a lot. I mean, it works on the level of you have a picture of Paul Reubens, the way he thinks as Paul Reubens, not as Pee-wee, the way he talks, the way he crafts things that you didn't have before. Although
that's true.
Although, yes, I think all of us who are gay who watch it have a lot. Okay, so when did you actually decide this, and what did that decision look like, and
how did it feel to have decided it? Right.
Although one thing that I think is sort of clear is, I mean, a lot of Paul Reubens' friends and associates say we didn't really know, or he never talked about it, or so it was not as if he was showing up places with boyfriends and there was this large circle of people who knew. It's like I think the wide world of people that he got to know after making this decision was sort of in the dark about it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I'm really struck by the thing that I'm trying to think through in a sense, which is that this really is a particular case of maybe one, because I mean, there are many artists in whose art in some way is reflective of their identity. But there's also something really touching about Paul Reubens choosing to recloset himself, or go into a closet, in order to practice his art. And the art that he winds up making, the person he winds up becoming for most of his career, is this very flamboyant.
What should we do now?
Exuberant.
I know. Let's go look at my toys.
Child man called Pee-wee Herman. And so much of this persona involves a kind of gayness, right? Involves something that you can recognize as being somehow queer. Is there anything to be said about, I don't even know if it's irony. I think it's like, it felt like another form of control for him.
Well, one thing I think is really interesting about the whole Pee-wee persona is that it takes one of the earliest homophobic tropes about gay men, which is that they get stalled somewhere in before full manhood and just decide to live in that kind of playful place without ever kind of growing up and becoming real men. It takes that and it owns it. I mean, and of course there's a whole gay history of, and that continues now, of taking stuff that is used against you by people who don't like you and making it your own. And I think that's one thing that Paul Reubens did that was legible in Pee-wee's Playhouse and in Pee-wee's Big Adventure to gay audiences that might have passed straight over the heads or alongside the heads of Pee-wee's big straight followership.
You know, there are moments in Pee-wee's Big Adventure where there's this whole sequence with his girlfriend. Her name is Dottie. Elizabeth Daly plays her. And there's just this winking, teasing on his part. She's just playing the girlfriend role, right? She kind of is a little mystified by what's going on with him, but she's like also, like us, mesmerized by him. And yet he's doing this winky peekaboo dance.
Look, Daddy, I like you.
I like you.
That's the thing, I like you too.
Daddy!
There's a lot of things about me you don't know anything about, Daddy.
He's basically telling her, you're never going to know who I am.
Right.
You're never going to get to the bottom of me. I'm just a mystery.
And you know, he builds it up. I think he says, you know, there are things about me you wouldn't know, things you couldn't know. And then practically like turning to the audience and winking, he says,
things you shouldn't understand.
And he's doing this as a way of brushing her off because he doesn't want a girlfriend clinging to him and he doesn't want the obligations of a boyfriend. And the minute he disappoints her and leaves and is out of her sight, he like giggles and laughs and shakes his head because he knows he's pulled it off. That's an amazing, like, if you're gay and you're watching that, you can't possibly miss what he's playing with.
I mean, and I guess this is sort of getting to an aspect of what I wanted to think through with you a little bit, which is at that point when the art is so playful and pungent and winking and transmissive, do we need the artist himself to make a declaration about who he is?
That's a really hard question.
Do we as the public need it, I guess is the question.
Do we need it in the sense that we cannot enjoy what Paul Reubens did without it? Manifestly not.
Right,
I mean,
right.
You know, people loved him. And if you didn't get what he was playing with in that scene, or if you didn't get what was being played with in the scene where he dresses up as an escaped convict's wife to evade a police roadblock, and then after they get through the police roadblock, he sort of forgets to take the costume off and just sort of sits there, you know, in his little fantasy head. Or if you didn't get the scene where he marches over to the house of his arch rival Francis, who lives in a big mansion and will not see him, and his sort of houseman says he's taking a bath right now, and Pee-wee says, "Oh, have they finished hosing him down?" Like, if you didn't get that what's being played there is a kind of like campy, bitchy thing that's right out of like Mame and Vera Charles, you can still like the movie.
Right. Oh, I thought you were going to go somewhere else. But like, there's something wrong with you. There's something very wrong with you if you're not picking up what Pee-wee's putting down. I actually think it might be useful to think about, I want to stay in the world of what the work is doing. He knew something was coming through, and some of it was explicit, like I am directly addressing the camera and I'm talking to you kids. But a lot of it was just the ambiguity that you're sort of articulating about what Pee-wee even is. Like, where developmentally is he? He's both and. He's neither nor. I mean, I really did as a kid think of him as a kind of Pinocchio.
I think that's a great analogy. I really do. First of all, we never really know what Pee-wee is. Is he an adult? Is he a child? Mm-hmm. He lives on his own, but he lives in this magical toy world.
This is weirdly a show about doors opening, portals, tunnels, people going in and out through. I mean, doors are always shutters opening and closing. This is, to me, the Playhouse was the closet that Paul Reubens put himself in. It's just that we spend his career on the other side of that door.
That's really fascinating. And I think what you're saying is really true, but none of this is to say, like, see, being in the closet is great.
No, I am not saying being in the closet is great.
Yeah, hi. If anyone's listening on social media, let me just make it clear that I'm not advocating the closet. But there is at the same time something incredibly charming and very Pee-wee-ish about the very concept of a secret language, and all of the stuff that he did as Pee-wee was steeped in that and connects to a larger part of the history of gay culture where things had to be encoded, often for legal reasons. And so there was a long time, many, many decades, when gay people took that necessity and turned it into a whole fascinating, arcane set of references and double meanings and winks and almost initiations. The more you learned this language, the more you could be welcomed into this slightly secret society. And so when people, like, I've heard some people say directly to me, well, isn't it kind of incredibly unseemly to advocate nostalgia for the closet? The closet is not anything that I feel nostalgic about. What I do think a lot of gay men of a certain set of generations feel nostalgic about is the incredibly vibrant culture that grew out of the frustrations of the closet.
I mean, if anything, what he had were great closet role models, right? Like particular, and what I mean by great is the artists themselves were great, and the ways in which they conveyed their sexual orientation, what I'm going to, for the purposes of this conversation, call gayness, is really apparent. I mean, he would have had Liberace as a known person. He would have been aware of people like Rock Hudson and, to a less obvious extent, maybe Van Johnson. I'm just sort of going through all my closeted, but like legibly gay
and then when he
stars.
was a teenager, like watching TV, it would be more like Paul Lynde on Bewitched as Uncle Arthur.
Yeah.
She wanted more milk.
What's wrong with getting it from the refrigerator?
I never milked a refrigerator.
Or like, not the actor, but the character of Dr. Smith on Lost in Space. and this is one really weird thing about the 60s is that pop culture tended to decouple male homosexuality from sex. What people saw that signaled to them that a character was gay wasn't attraction to men. It was this whole set of weird traits that
an ascot.
Right, an ascot, a mincing walk, a literal limp wrist, a kind of bitchy sense of humor, sometimes even a weird voice. So then you get to Pee-wee, who, like, is a man who doesn't exactly act like a man, but he doesn't act like anyone.
I know you are, but what am I?
You're a nerd.
I know you are, but what am I?
You're an idiot.
I know you are, but what am I?
I know you are, but what am I?
And I think when we're talking about Paul Reubens' closetedness, we should make the distinction that he didn't publicly present himself as heterosexual. He didn't disavow his sexuality. He just didn't address it at all. I wanted to throw in one other thing because I think it's important to say. Gay history is really fast. It's really compressed. I know that
you mean the window of time in which it is happening.
Yes.
Okay.
Sometimes it can seem agonizingly slow and frustrating as we live it. But really what has happened from Stonewall in 1969 to now is so astonishing that we don't always pay attention to one consequence of it, which is that gay generations are really compact.
Mm-hmm.
They're not like straight generations.
Yeah.
I was born in 1963. If I were 5 years older, I might not be here. You know, that's what a difference my date of birth made vis-a-vis the AIDS crisis. If I were 5 years younger, I might have started to learn about AIDS in middle school. You know, it's that consequential. Paul Reubens, if he were alive now, would be 72. So when we think about his decisions and we think about his choices, we have to, as hard as it can be for younger people to do this, we have to try to put ourselves in the heads of someone who was born in the early 1950s and grew up with those social restrictions and mores.
I mean, I'm going to say this and you're going to laugh because it's going to sound really just too much. But like, what does the end of the rainbow look like? Like, is there an end? Should there be an end? And because I don't know. I do think these stories are important, and I think they're important in art. But I'm also at a point where I'm wondering if I'm tired of seeing that iteration of it. But I also understand its sort of moral and political value.
Right. I mean, I remember like in the early to mid 90s when I first started writing about and helping shape stories about LGBT issues, there's a lot of talk about movie stars coming out or not coming out, and what the magical finish line would look like for that. The
comingest of outs!
Yes.
Who is gonna shatter the glass? Who's gonna break the closet? Who's going to destroy it?
The finish line was always created in order for gay people not to be able to get to it. Like it's you know, it wasn't the dream, it was the impossible dream.
Right.
So, you know, like in the 90s, for instance, the name that would come up over and over again was Tom Cruise. Not because everybody thought Tom Cruise was gay, or not only because some people thought Tom Cruise was gay, wanted him to be gay, whatever. It was because Tom Cruise was the pinnacle of movie stardom. And so people would say, when a Tom Cruise can come out and still play a viable heterosexual star and still be an action star, then and only then will we know that we have won. And of course, like what fascinates me about that is there's nothing that says that that's the finish line. Why wasn't, you know, why couldn't, you know, no one was saying like when two young stars will star in a gay love story and that movie will become widely acclaimed and a popular box office hit and a Best Picture nominee like Brokeback Mountain.
Yeah.
Like that's as much of a finish line as anything you could contrive about a star's coming out. But the interesting thing to me about the Tom Cruise example, especially when it came from gay people, like we were all limited by our imagination in the 1990s because all we could think of as like the great accomplishment would be someone who had been in the closet for a really long time suddenly announcing that he was gay, which of course is much more complicated and messy than what we increasingly have now, which is young stars identifying as gay or lesbian or queer or bi or trans or other from the beginning of their careers. That was something that we weren't even very good at imagining in the 90s because we were so connected then to the question of the closet that we couldn't imagine a universe in which the closet itself
there
was
had
a slightly
never been one.
Yeah,
right?
like it was an outmoded concept.
I just keep a jacket in this closet. My sexuality is just in me. I don't put it anywhere else. But so are we past that though? Are we, I mean, I think you've identified, and I would agree with you, that generationally, you know, we are now with a set of generations that no longer think this way, right? Where the idea of a closet is kind of laughable. And it's much more normal for people to just not declare a sexual orientation because it's their business.
To answer your question, yes, we are past it now. And we are also not there yet, and we are also right in it. It's
the impossible dream.
It's never one thing.
Yeah.
I mean, Kristen Stewart, for instance, marrying her girlfriend is not something that people really could have imagined
40 years ago. Inconceivable.
Reality will always ultimately outstrip your imagination, and yet, have we hit the equivalent of the coming out in mid-career of a Tom Cruise level male action movie star? No, we haven't. But maybe what that means is we should stop looking at an early 90s model for what success would mean.
Well, I also think that the movie business is making it really easy for us to not think that way anymore, right?
Right.
But there's no culturally hegemonic force that is like making it so that we can only see one paradigm as being the thing that's going to shatter the mold in terms of how coming out and being openly gay would even work.
Right. And what even coming out as what?
Right.
Is a new that's a 21st century question using a 20th century framework because if you for instance come out as queer using that word, you are both announcing that you are in the category of something other than completely heterosexual. Right. And for many people, you're making a statement that invites further questions.
Yes.
Because coming out can mean anything from I'm gay, but I prefer the word queer, or I'm lesbian, but I prefer the word queer, to, I haven't, but I would, I might, to I'm something else, to I'm not going to talk about what I am. 2 years from now, I might use a different word to describe myself. I think young people now are very, very comfortable with that, with coming out, being a way of saying, at this moment that I'm saying this is where I am in my journey as a sexual being.
It's not fixed. It's not binary. It's not a box. It's a spectrum. It's fluid. It could change at any minute. And I'm not falling for your little traps.
Right. And for people, my age, there's a temptation, and I think it's a temptation we should resist, but I also understand it, to say, oh, come on. You're really you're leaving all of your options open. This is the danger, I think, of being an older gay person is that you can start resenting that the thing you wanted has come true, which is that it's easier for people in some ways now than it was for you, and that they have more options and opportunities than you did. And, we have to really fight that at all costs.
There are so many examples of people, and this might be what we're talking about there are a lot of models in play, right? For example, I think we have people out here using, a particular kind of old paradigm of the way we think about this, like Queen Latifah has never officially declared herself to be out, has never said, hey, everybody, here's my deal. But whose deal is it seems evident to me, I don't need her to say the words because I'm literate. I can read. I mean, she's all but affinitized her relationship to the community, right? She is happy prided on national television. She doesn't misstep in that realm. She doesn't seem like she's not in the closet. She's not out, but she's out-ish, right?
I always think of Jodie Foster in this regard because I think of her speech at the 2013 Golden Globes when she sort of said, I never needed to come out because I still believe in privacy and I believe that you don't have to make an announcement of everything. But she said that in a golden clothes.
Right, yeah.
So
a Cecil B. DeMille accepted speech.
If you had been a public figure from the time that you were a toddler, if you'd had to fight for a life that felt real and honest and normal against all odds, then maybe then you too might value privacy above all else. Privacy.
Right.
Windexing her glass closet.
So, but at the same time, there is no way that speech did not constitute coming out.
Right.
And she knew it. And now she's out. I mean, she's very out. She thanks her wife. She's completely out. And I mean, if you want to be sort of really zealous about it, you can say, and you can see her comfort in her life in her acting now. Like she's in a more open, more comfortable place, and it's fantastic. But I always think of that speech as like
one of the real torture experiences for me as a viewer. Like, this person was suffering in doing the thing like that. To me, that speech was proof that it's hard for everybody to do it.
Yes, exactly.
It's hard for everybody.
Exactly. Like I was in the room when she made that speech, and I really had trouble processing it in the moment.
That sentence does not diagram, Mark.
I was uncomfortable. I mean, it was unnerving because you did see someone like getting a Lifetime Achievement Award, and her clear frustration at navigating this issue spilled out and was there.
Evident struggle. But that was one of those moments for me where I actually watched that thinking, if it's this hard for this person to do this in front of millions and millions of people, do we need to know?
If we say, yes, we need that, then, well, if we...
Which you're kind of saying a little bit, right?
Yeah. But need can really shade quickly into by any means necessary. If we need it, then can't we out this person? Because if it's a need, it's a must. It's mandatory. I guess theoretically, the queer utopia would always include people who, like famous people who did not feel the need to identify. But I guess I don't entirely believe in that utopia. Maybe that's a product of my generation. I think this is one place where it's really useful to talk about trans people vis-a-vis coming out, because I don't think we'd have a discussion about, well, do trans people need this? The answer is yes, desperately.
Sure.
And it doesn't really need explaining why, and nor do the incredible costs and risks of doing that need explaining. I mean, it to put yourself on the line publicly as a trans person now is to really risk something.
Your life.
Yes.
Your life.
Your life.
Yeah.
I think I would be wary of drawing a distinction in terms of saying, yeah, we don't really need it from gay people or bisexuals or lesbians anymore, but we do need it from trans people. If we're going to say we need it,
we need the whole alphabet to be out.
Exactly. Yeah.
I also think that we might have gotten to the end of the rainbow. And there are people who are like nearing it and being like, oh, I can see people down at the bottom of the arch. You know what? They got it. I'm just gonna step back. I'm not going back in the closet, but I don't need to be out here saying what I am or what I'm not. I'm just gonna just be comfortable in my privacy. I don't want to be obligated to like show up at, parades, and I don't want to do Pride Month. I don't want to have to post a flag. I don't want to do anything. I just want to live my life. And as a personally proud queer person, so I'm gonna let the people at the bottom of the rainbow do the work.
Well,
that's what I thought. Like, it's just too hard or it's too much to do right now. I, professional football player, am not even going to bother coming out because you know what? It's just going to be too much work.
That is everybody's right. except I would say for actively homophobic politicians who I do ethically believe should be outed. But but if you do that, don't say you're living your life proudly. You know, you might imagine you are, but what you're doing is living your life conveniently. You know, you don't get to, you know, you don't get to sort of claim the spoils of popular success while omitting a huge piece of who you are from your public account of yourself and say you're living proudly. I mean, this issue goes back a really long way. And almost everyone I knew who came out in the 80s or 90s had this little moment after coming out where they felt like they had to differentiate themselves from their new community. It's like, well,
wait, what does that look like?
Well, it looks like, you know, in the 80s or 90s, what it looked like was, okay, well, I'm out, I'm gay, but like, I'm not going to dance on a float at a pride parade, or I'm not going to wear this, or I don't have to like this kind of music, or I don't have to go to those clubs, or, you know, it's this moment, this transitional moment when you're like a little gay guppy or whatever, where you start realizing that coming out is the beginning of your story and that you still have to figure out a ton about who you are.
You are speaking my language, Mark Harris, because I was just thinking about this after I read your piece. I had never thought this before, but it occurred to me because I was just thinking about how I was going to talk to you. And I remembered, I don't know about you, but I came out to a bunch of straight people. Coming out is not like, you don't open a door one day and there you are surrounded by all these like loving, supportive, you know, gay people. You got to find those people.
Right. Like it is a process for all I know, people now, maybe some people do it with like a to-all email or a TikTok or something where it's like out all at once. But for a lot of us back then, you kind of subdivided things that way. Like there's your friends, there's your family.
Who did you come out to?
I think the first person I came out to was I came out late. I came out like in my late 20s. And so
I was 20.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and I also had a slightly unusual coming out in that I was not living a gay life before I hadn't gone on a date with a guy even before I came out, let alone kissed a guy.
And you knew?
I knew.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, on some level I knew since I was a teenager, but I had a long, rough journey wrestling with it, and I had relationships with women, and so it was complicated. So the first person I came out to, I think, was my former college roommate. And then, you know, after that, it was a sequence. My gay friend at work, my straight friend at work, my like the most sympathetic member of my family, then the next more difficult member of my family, my current friends, my, you know, you I think you figure out, or you did at least back when I did it, you figure out sort of organically what order feels right to you to talk to people about this. And as it goes on and rolls on, it gets easier. But we should note that, you know, some people never get all the way to the end of the finish line. Maybe you don't want to come out at work because that you work in a particular place where it could cause an issue for you. Or maybe you have that one elderly relative about whom some other relative says, oh, it would kill her. And you're like, well, I don't want to kill someone. So maybe I'll just, you know, let that be.
I definitely would just be like, hey, Aunt Mary, guess what?
Are you sitting down?
Stand up.
Right. But everybody like works out their own narrative, like their own order for how they're going to do this. And also I do want to point out that phase that I was talking about, that phase where you want to kind of differentiate yourself from the pack. If you're healthy, that is just a phase. And you eventually realize that, yeah, by coming out, you are announcing yourself as part of a community that is full of people who are not at all like you, and people who are somewhat like you, and people who are a lot like you. But you don't get to say like which parts of the community you think are worthy and which parts you don't, and
Yeah, but Mark, that's going to happen anyway. Like
Right.
You go to Provincetown, you can see the nomenclatures breaking each other down as you walk down Commercial Street.
Completely. Completely. And like
That's a right
hopefully
of
by
the community.
Yeah, and hopefully like the more comfortable you get with your own identity, the more you think that's fun or interesting,
Yes.
or at least not threatening to your own identity within that community.
I mean, there was a time in the late 90s and early 2000s where like coming out stories was a thing, where like people would share how they told whoever was in their lives that they were out. And occasionally popular culture would reflect that. The depictions of gay life in American popular culture, especially in screen culture, has, had a lot of peaks and valleys and stops and starts and qualitative dissonances. But I'm wondering if there is like an example of a thing in American popular culture right now that feels to you like, this to me is a very good example of what things could look like if there were no political stressors, but not apolitical, right? But also doesn't have any shame attached to it, isn't about scandal in some way, but it's just about like regular people doing their thing who are also like a Buttigieg era depiction of gay life, like a male identified piece of culture, but it could be anything.
Right. I mean, I don't think there's ever a single piece of culture
No,
because if you pick one, instantly all of the people who feel excluded by that piece of culture are going to be like, well, this is erasure of so-and-so.
Listen, I watched a lot of bad lesbian movies to help me understand myself. And I'm looking at you, Claire of the Moon.
Sex is sex.
It may be for you, but sex between women is as raw as it gets.
Okay, I'll give you one example.
Yes.
I don't want to put pressure on this example by saying this is it, this is the apex. But when I look at someone like Colman Domingo, an out actor, getting a Best Actor Oscar nomination for playing a gay historical figure, Bayard Rustin, and then the next year getting another Best Actor Oscar nomination for playing just a completely different character.
Sexual orientation is.
Right.
This is Colman Domingo in Sing Sing.
What part do you play?
From time to time I do act, like we all do.
So are you acting at all during this interview?
I would be very wary of using that to sort of generalize to
but it's
all of gay culture.
But it's a full example, and I know exactly what you mean.
Right. This is like, forget the Tom Cruise example. This is what we were looking for. Somebody like at the top of his profession it's not a coming out story. Just being able to play a variety of great roles. That's
without an ostensible burden of representing, an entire people.
Exactly. That's pretty great. But that said, I want to say that I think all of us in the community have to be wary of something that we often do, which is we pick the best, most advanced, most cheerful example of something, and we use it to tell ourselves that the problems that precede that have been solved. We all have to constantly remind ourselves that we are in gay history in many different places at the same time.
Yes.
And that the person who's on the leading edge of something is not representative of the people in the middle of the pack and the people at the back of the pack who are still really, really struggling with a lot of complicated things. We have to extend as much grace and sympathy and support to those people as we expend energy cheering about the big victories that we have.
So what I hear you saying is, y'all, we got to keep coming out.
100%.
We got to keep coming out. The closet is real, and it is as ever present as the proliferation, the never before have we seen of this particular moment in what I'm going to reduce to something like gay representation. We still need stories.
I mean, one person's coming out as antiquated is another person's I can't come out yet.
Right.
And those are both members of our community.
Mark, we got to the end of the rainbow of this conversation. We did it.
I love it.
Thanks for doing this. I appreciate
Thank you for having me on.
Like and subscribe right here on YouTube.